My name is Josephine Myers. I'm 32 and currently living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Just a month ago, I lost my grandfather, Walter, who had been battling heart disease for nearly a year. He was the only one in our family who genuinely believed in me, mentored me, and supported me until the very end. I hoped his funeral would bring our fractured family together for once, to honor the man who had built a business empire from the ground up. But less than 2 days after the funeral, my mother, always intense and unpredictable, called with a cold, firm voice. "We need to talk. It's about your grandfather's estate." I already knew what was coming. My mother, Walter's only daughter, never understood the value of hard work. While Grandpa spent decades building Myers Auto Pro, a chain of auto repair shops across the Southwest, she jumped from one failed marriage to another, racking up credit card debt and relying on his reluctant generosity. 3 days later, I got an email from Grandpa's attorney, Mr. Harris, summoning us for the reading of the will. I had zero expectations, but I showed up promptly in the familiar wood-paneled room that smelled of leather and paper, just like it had for decades. There sat my mother, my cousins Elliot and Vanessa, and her third husband, Robert. Mr. Harris began reading through small bequests, gifts to loyal employees, close friends, and even a donation to an animal shelter, all things that felt very much like Walter. Then, looking straight at me, he read. "To my granddaughter, Josephine Lee Myers, I leave the remainder of my estate, including all business holdings, real estate, investments, and personal belongings, except for those previously listed above." The room fell into stunned silence. I sat frozen. I had assumed the estate would be split or, at the very least, that my mother would inherit the majority. But everything? All 18 garages, properties in Albuquerque, Tucson, and the undeveloped land in Utah? Before I could even react, my mother slammed her hand on the table. "This is a mistake. Read that again." Mr. Harris remained calm. "Mrs. Lorraine, this will was legally updated 6 months before Mr. Walter's passing. It is fully valid and witnessed." Vanessa burst into tears. "There's no way he'd do this to us. We're his family." Elliot only shook his head at me silently. Robert looked stiff, jaw clenched around whatever thoughts he wasn't saying aloud. I sat quietly, still absorbing the shock, but part of me understood. This was the result of years he had spent watching me hustle, never asking for help, never playing victim. I remembered the late nights he'd ask me to analyze profit reports. "We're down 12% this month. What do we cut first?" he'd ask. I always tried to answer practically, and he'd just nod. "Assets aren't trophies, Josie. They're tools. Give them to someone who knows how to use them." No one else in that room ever heard that advice. Just me. As I left the law office, my mother cornered me in the parking lot. "This isn't over, Josie. I'm not letting this go." I looked at her, not with anger, just quiet sadness. "I didn't take anything. I'm just following his wishes." She scoffed. "And what's the word of a dying old man worth?" My fists clenched, but I didn't reply. 3 days later, I got a text from Vanessa. "Family dinner this Saturday at Uncle Greg's. Mom says you have to come. No skipping." It was clearly a trap, but I decided to go anyway. Grandpa had always taught me not to hide or run. "Be quiet if you must," he'd say, "but never back down." So I arrived at Uncle Greg's house at 7 p.m. sharp. The place, once warm and welcoming for family Thanksgivings, now felt like a courtroom in disguise. The moment I stepped inside, I felt the tension. The lighting was dim, the air was heavy with scented candles, and everyone's eyes were already on me. My mother, Robert, Vanessa, Uncle Greg, and a well-dressed stranger sat in the living room. He carried a leather briefcase and looked at me like a chess piece to be moved. "This is Mr. Caldwell," my mother said with a fake smile. Our family's legal advisor. I didn't sit down. Since when do we have a legal advisor? Since you decided to keep something that doesn't belong to you, she replied, still smiling. I finally took the only open seat, deliberately distant from the others, and set down my bag. So, are we here for reconciliation, or is this a courtroom? Mr. Caldwell, with a smooth, practiced voice, said, we're hoping for reasonable negotiations. The recent inheritance has caused tension, and there are concerns about the will's legitimacy. I stayed calm. Walter had full mental capacity when the will was signed. 2 doctors confirmed it. Attorney Harris was present. There's nothing illegal. My mother leaned in. You stayed with him every day. Whispered things. Took advantage while he was vulnerable. He always spoiled you. Vanessa chimed in. It's just not fair. He wouldn't cut out his own daughter. I stared right at her. Then where were you when he was in the hospital? Or when he forgot his banking password? Or when he asked me to co-sign the lease for the El Paso location? Silence. Mr. Caldwell pulled out documents. We've prepared a proposal. The family would like you to return the business ownership and investments. In exchange, you'd keep the Tucson property and a lump sum. Mom nodded like she was doing me a favor. He didn't build all this for one person. I opened my bag and pulled out a certified copy of the will, along with letters and documents from Attorney Harris. None of you heard him say, assets belong to those who respect them. I didn't manipulate him. I didn't ask for anything. He chose me. I'm not signing a thing. My mother slapped the table. Don't act like you're the only one who understood him. You're my daughter. I won't let you tear this family apart. I stood. My voice was cold. The family was already broken. Grandpa just finally had the courage to cut out the rot. And I walked out into the cold Flagstaff night, burning on the inside, not with grief, but fury. Not because they wanted the money, but because they dared to twist the legacy of the one man I loved and respected more than anyone. Back home in Santa Fe, I opened the safe Grandpa had entrusted me with during our last private meeting. Inside was a folder labeled, The Mirror of Truth. I'd never opened it, too scared, maybe too respectful. But that night, I finally did. Inside was a brown leather notebook filled with his meticulous handwriting. The first few pages were a record of money transfers to my mother, Lorraine, dating back to 2005. Each entry was brutally honest. March 2010, $7,500, claimed for Vanessa's tuition. Receipt shows jewelry store purchase. August 2014, $12,000, supposedly roof repair. Later spotted on vacation in Mexico with Robert. November 2017, $9,000, said for Elliot's medical bills. Found photos from Las Vegas wedding party. There were 37 entries in total, almost $400,000 wasted over 15 years. It didn't feel like a number. It felt like ice sliding down my spine, not because of the dollar amount, but because of the sheer boldness. She had taken money under the pretense of family, responsibility, and care for her children, only to spend it on vanity and indulgence. I picked up my phone and began scrolling through my mother's Instagram, the one with cozy captions and images meant to radiate warmth. A photo from November 17th jumped out at me. She stood in front of a high-end spa in Sedona with the caption, renewing my soul to keep loving deeply. Grateful for self-care. I flipped to Grandpa's journal from that same day. $15,000. Lorraine had called crying. Said Elliot had been in a car crash and the hospital bills were too high. Grandpa wired it immediately. But there had been no crash, I was sure of that. I kept scrolling through Vanessa's older posts. One image from 2016 showed both of them grinning on a yacht in Miami. The journal entry from that same week? $9,000. Vanessa was allegedly battling depression, and Lorraine claimed she needed time off. More support requested. I started printing out the photos, noting the captions, and comparing them to the financial records in Grandpa's notebook. The deeper I went, the clearer it became, not just manipulation, but an elaborate system built on guilt, performance, and carefully crafted lies. I took all the documentation and brought it to Helen Barker, my attorney, sharp, efficient, and no stranger to messy estate disputes in New Mexico. She reviewed everything slowly, then looked at me, calm and direct. This is a gold mine. If they come after you, this protects you. If they try to smear you, this can cut through it. And if you want to expose them, this is your spotlight. I nodded. I don't want revenge. I just want them to stop. She closed the folder. Sometimes, to make them stop, you have to be the one who starts. That night, a message came from an unknown number. It was Elliot. I didn't know it had gotten this serious. I was just doing what Mom told me. I'm sorry. I didn't answer right away. But one thing was clear, this wasn't going to be a battle over fake smiles and tense family dinners. It would be a battle of facts, documents, and truth, the kind that forced people hiding behind the word family to face the destruction they'd caused. The next Monday morning, cold and gray, I walked out of a team meeting at our Albuquerque garage branch and checked my phone. A message from someone I'd never heard of, Vanessa Legal Advisory Group. Dear Miss Josephine Myers, we represent Lorraine Beckett and her family in requesting that you cease all involvement with jointly held estate assets pending litigation. You are accused of manipulating a mentally diminished elder for financial gain by influencing his will. I read it 3 times. The weight of the words settled into my chest like stone. I didn't sit in the car out of shock, I sat there out of rage. They had officially escalated. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was war, a direct attack on my character and my grandfather's wishes. I forwarded the email to Helen immediately. Her response came in less than 10 minutes. They're not in the state bar directory, she said over the phone. This group? Not a law firm. Just a private advisory outfit. No legal authority. So it's a scam? Not quite. It's what we call legal-sounding intimidation. If you reply or sign anything, they could twist it into an admission later. I'm not signing anything, I snapped. But Helen, they're accusing me of manipulating a dying man. She took a breath. Then it's time we move first. And I know exactly how. 3 days later, we sat down with Dr. Everett, Grandpa's longtime primary care physician. A seasoned, measured man in his 60s, he'd cared for Grandpa for nearly a decade. After we explained the situation, he nodded. I already signed an affidavit stating Walter was fully sound when he changed his will. I'll testify, no hesitation. Helen leaned forward. Were there recordings or notes? Yes. We record all legal discussions at the clinic with patient consent. Walter gave full permission. My heart jumped. Did he explain why he chose me? Clear as day, he replied. He was confident in his reasons. We requested the full audio and his last 6 months of medical records. Every puzzle piece was falling into place. If my mother was going to accuse me of controlling Grandpa, I would let his own voice speak the truth. I didn't convince him of anything, he knew what he was doing. He saw this coming. Helen advised me not to answer any emails, messages, or calls from the so-called legal group. Instead, she would send a formal cease and desist, warning them to back off or face a defamation countersuit. I thought we were ahead, until that evening. A blog post appeared on Facebook, shared by one of Mom's old friends. Ambitious granddaughter pressures dying grandfather into will change. A modern American family tragedy. My name wasn't in it, but it didn't have to be. The details were unmistakable: a garage owner in Santa Fe, the age, the situation. A smear job, elegant and venomous. Comments poured in. Kids today just wait for the inheritance. Sad how easy it is to manipulate the elderly these days. I turned off my phone. But word was already spreading. Old co-workers, friends, not accusing, but gently asking, "Is it true?" That night, I stared at the ring Grandpa gave me when I graduated. Inside, it was engraved, "Earned it." "They're tarnishing everything you stood for," I whispered. "But I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, Helen sent her reply. No threats. Just a single 12-minute audio clip, Walter's session with Dr. Everett, explaining why Lorraine was excluded, and why I was the only one he trusted to protect what he built. "I'm not leaving behind money," he said at the end. "I'm leaving behind values. And Josephine will know what that means." That Saturday, while I was reviewing the books at the Santa Fe branch, the front doorbell rang. Strange for that hour. I looked up and froze. Elliot stood there in the fading sunlight, a worn backpack on his shoulder. He looked tired, not just physically, but in his soul. I opened the door. "What's going on?" I asked. He stepped in, voice shaky. I didn't know where else to go. I made him tea. We sat side by side in silence. He stared at the floor for a long time before speaking. "You already know, don't you?" he whispered. "About the fake accident. That scholarship I never got. Mom borrowing money to open a store and funneling it to Uncle Rob. I overheard her last night. She told Vanessa that if you didn't give in, everything they planned since February would fall apart." He paused, his voice breaking. "She said Grandpa's death was well-timed but not ideal. That it was a strategic drop." I clenched my fists. "Did you say anything?" I asked her if she meant it. She just said, "Guys like Walter don't need sympathy." He looked up, and for the first time, I saw it. The kid I once thought was a pawn, now waking up. Frightened, but aware. "I want out," he said. "I can't live like that anymore. But I have no money. No idea what to do. Could I stay with you for a bit? Maybe learn how the business works?" I didn't answer right away. I had braced for every angle: Lorraine, Robert, Vanessa. But not this. Not Elliot leaving them. I stood up. "I've got a spare room. But no sleeping in or slacking off." He smiled. "I'll wake up earlier than you." That night, Elliot moved in. The place was small, but warm enough to begin again. I laid out a thick blanket and we unpacked Grandpa's books together. He adjusted fast. Found a job at the garage. I taught him the ropes: ordering parts, handling complaints, managing inventory. He took notes, asked smart questions, paid attention. One evening, locking up the shop, he asked, "Remember how Grandpa always made us check the AC filters before May?" I laughed. "Yeah. He used to grumble about them every April." We both cracked up, the kind of laughter that breaks through tension. I began to see what Grandpa had seen in Elliot. Careful thought. Humility. Gratitude, finally awakening in the boy who was once handed everything by default. A week later, Mom texted Elliot. "If you go back there, I'll never forgive you. Remember who paid for your schooling." He showed me the message. I asked, "Want to reply?" He shook his head. "I'll respond by living a different life." I held his hand. For the first time, I truly felt I wasn't alone anymore. For days after Elliot moved in with me, Helen emailed me with the subject, "Time to strike back." She had attached a file over 80 pages long, complete legal documentation confirming Grandpa Walter's will was legitimate. It included a recorded conversation between him and Dr. Everett, 6 months of psychiatric evaluations, and signed statements from the 2 witnesses present during the will update. It was flawless, no room for doubt. That evening, Helen, Elliot, and I met in the temporary office of our attorney to discuss strategy. Helen laid out the documents, tagging them with yellow sticky notes. "We'll send them a copy. No threats, no harsh words. Just the truth, plain and undeniable." Elliot's eyes widened when he saw one particular page, his mother Lorraine's signature from the 2020 financial reconciliation, clearly stating she'd received $25,000 from Grandpa Walter as a personal, non-refundable gift. Helen pointed at it. "If they keep accusing you of manipulation, I'll file a countersuit for knowingly falsifying evidence and harassing the estate." I nodded. "Send it." 3 days later, Helen received a response from the law group, now renamed Beckett Family Advocacy Services, clearly an attempt to distance themselves from the earlier case. I was reviewing garage camera footage when my phone buzzed. "It's over," Helen said. "They've withdrawn the claim, no conditions." I blinked. What? They realized the evidence would backfire on them. Everything was documented and irrefutable. I lifted my hands from the keyboard. It didn't feel like victory. Just a cool, quiet relief. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just retreat. Elliot was outside wiping down the garage shelves. I went out and said simply, "They dropped the claim." He set the rag down, met my eyes, and after a moment said, "So it's really over." I didn't reply immediately. I looked toward the hazy New Mexico mountains, where Grandpa Walter had taken me camping just 3 months before he passed. "No," I said. "But it's a start." That night, Helen and I reviewed the next steps, confirmed the will in local court. Submit asset transfer forms, from Myers Autopro, the garage chain, Grandpa's investment portfolio, and his real estate in Flagstaff, Tucson, and Los Cruces. And establish a new trust for Elliot, just like Grandpa once suggested. After Helen left, I sat alone. Elliot was already asleep, his old backpack still hanging by the chair, a quiet reminder that not everyone starts on the right path, but everyone deserves the chance to change. Around 9 p.m., my phone rang. It was Vanessa. I didn't answer. Then a text came through. "Josephine, I know what Mom did went too far. I don't know what to say. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Even if it's just to listen." I reread it several times. No excuses. No justifications. Just quiet, human honesty. I haven't replied. But I know one day I'll need to talk, not fight. Grandpa once told me, justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. It comes from how you protect what's right, even when no one else does. I looked at his photo on the wall, calm smile, steady eyes. That spring, I officially became the owner of Myers Autopro, the name tied to Grandpa's life's work. But instead of celebrating or announcing it publicly, I spent my first morning as owner sitting with the longtime mechanics at the original Santa Fe garage. No big speeches, no suit. Just a stack of note cards, a big thermos of coffee, and 2 apple turnovers, like Grandpa always brought when it was time to talk seriously. "We're going to make changes," I told them, meeting each of their eyes. Not to erase what Grandpa built, but to help it last 50 more years, stronger, fairer, and smarter. The first garage I restructured was in Los Cruces, which had been poorly managed for 2 years. I upgraded the software, expanded EV servicing, and hired 3 graduates from a local trade school. I set a new rule: every technician must undergo regular clean technology training. Elliot noticed my new plans and asked, "I thought you were just taking over, not expanding?" I smiled and slid the plans to him. Grandpa didn't leave us something to preserve in glass. He left us something to grow. At the same time, I began laying the foundation for the Walter L. Myers Foundation, a nonprofit for scholarships in mechanical engineering, especially for students from working-class or low-income families. The first name on the list? Elliot. You serious? He asked, uncertain. I'm still learning spreadsheets. I'm not some genius like you. I don't need a genius, I said. I need someone who owns up to their mistakes and works to make things right. You've got that, and heart. Elliot applied to the University of New Mexico, majoring in small business admin, with a minor in sustainable automotive engineering. In his essay, he wrote about Grandpa, and how he once took everything for granted, until he learned to choose differently. He was accepted for the fall. I visited every garage branch, not just to audit, but to meet every person. I listened to David, a senior mechanic, talk about his back pain. I called our insurer to renegotiate coverage. I asked Jennifer, an accountant in Tucson, if she was being fairly paid. When she hesitated, I ordered a full audit. Slowly, a new energy emerged, not from renovations, but because people no longer felt invisible. One June afternoon, I got a handwritten letter from a student in Gallup, the first Walter Fund recipient. Thank you for believing that a mechanic's kid and a baker's son can become an engineer. I won't let you down. I folded the letter and placed it next to Grandpa's photo, taken in front of his first garage in 1979. His smile wide, hands covered in grease. And I realized, I wasn't just running garages. I was protecting a way of life. One where labor isn't just about surviving, but building something of worth for the next generation. A true legacy isn't about the assets we inherit. It's about how we use them to build something better, for those who deserve it, and for those who never got the chance. One morning in mid-August, while I was reviewing quarterly reports, the doorbell rang. Elliot was still sleeping. I answered it. It was Vanessa, no makeup, hair pulled back, holding a large envelope. She looked more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. Do you have a minute? She asked softly. Come in, I said, wary but not unkind. She sat down, eyes scanning the room until they landed on a photo of Grandpa and me, taken the day I graduated. I used to think Grandpa only cared about you to spite my mom, she said. I stayed quiet. Vanessa opened the envelope and showed me a handwritten apology, withdrawal of all legal complaints, and, most surprisingly, her mom Lorraine's signed application to a community counseling program in Flagstaff. She started therapy 2 weeks ago, Vanessa said. Not regularly yet, but she's going. I looked at her, something in her expression had broken open. Gone was the old pride. What remained was quiet exhaustion. I didn't come here to ask for anything, she added. I just wanted you to know, I get it now. And I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I gave a small nod. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a door left open. If she's really trying to change, I said, let her. But don't expect me to go back to a family that isn't real anymore. Vanessa nodded. I understand. When she left, I didn't walk her out. But I kept the folder. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. A week later, I got a handwritten note from my mother. No pleading. No excuses. Just 4 simple lines. Josephine. Thank you for preserving what we couldn't. If someday you want to talk, I'll be here. Mom. Helen read it, then simply shrugged. You don't have to respond, but I think you will. I didn't reply right away, but I did ask Helen to schedule an appointment with Dr. Everett for my mother. Not for another assessment, but for something genuine, something that could help her begin healing without using excuses. Elliot noticed the change before anyone else. She texted me yesterday, he said. What did she say? I asked. Nothing about money. Just asked if I was eating enough. And you? I sent her a photo of the sandwich you made me. And I wrote, I'm doing fine, thanks to my sister. I smiled. For the first time, the word sister meant more than just a blood connection. It meant support, consistency, care. That fall, the Walter Elmer Myers Foundation hosted its first scholarship ceremony at a technical college in Las Vegas. 12 students, most from small, overlooked towns like the one I grew up in, walked across the stage to receive their awards. Toward the back of the room, I noticed a familiar shape. Dark hair. Slight frame. Sitting quietly and alone. My mother. No fanfare, no announcement. No invitation. But she came. She stayed for the entire event, then slipped out before I could reach her. Helen touched my shoulder softly. She's trying, in her own way, she said. I nodded. My family wasn't whole. Not yet. Not completely. There were still unresolved conversations, untouched grief, wounds that hadn't yet healed. But the cycle of greed had broken. And in the hollow places that old damage left behind, something new had started to take root. Accountability. Openness. A quiet kind of hope. We weren't returning to the past, we couldn't. But we were learning how to go forward. Step by step. One repaired bond at a time. One sincere act after another. And to me, that was enough to begin again. Josephine's story shows that legacy isn't just something to inherit, it's something to protect, to build on, to transform. She didn't just defend what her grandfather left behind. She used it as a platform to spark meaningful change. She brought a struggling business back to life, supported those around her, and gently worked to mend the broken pieces of her family. In a world where selfishness often drowns out connection, Josephine chose a harder, nobler path. She stood her ground. She chose truth over convenience. And she built a future rooted in action, not empty promises. What do you think of Josephine's journey and the choices she made? Would you have chosen the same path in her position? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and follow the channel for more powerful, real-life stories about resilience, family, and healing.